Okay, welcome to Eclecticity. I'm here with Joel Kiekintveld. We are talking about a book that he has just put together, a verb and not a noun. But as this is also a um, part of a series that I'm doing on the U2 Fandom at 50 for the band's 50th anniversary, Joel, how about if we get started? Just give me a little bit of background on how you became a U2 fan.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. And for me, I know for a lot of folks, it goes down to like one moment, and I could probably pinpoint that. But for me, it's actually kind of a period of time. So my dad was a youth pastor, and growing up, he would invite all the youth group kids over on Sunday night. This is like kind of the early mid 80s. And they would come over for a campfire on Sunday night, and they would often bring records. So I know I remember hearing War in that period and like probably not knowing what to do with it. I was like late elementary, early junior high, but remembering hearing U2. But the moment that stands out, we moved from the country to kind of out in the rural area of Michigan to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I in the spring or in January of 87. And I remember being at work in the greenhouse where I got a job and hearing Where the Streets Have No Name for the first time. And just remembering, like, one, this is the longest intro of any like rock song I can ever remember. That like long guitar intro that builds to like the kind of swell into the song, and I just remember that moment. I know right where I was. I could go right back to it in that town and stand there and just remember hearing that on the radio. And from then it was listening to a lot of U2. I had a friend that I worked in that same greenhouse with. We started exchanging, kind of Christmas gifts or whatever, and he gave me Live Under a Blood Red Sky one Christmas, and just the kind of the rawness and the energy of that era of their live performance just still resonates with me. Still one of my favorite records. And then I even had like a beat up car in high school that I named Rattlin' Home. So like all of that stuff. And then what really, really kind of cemented it for me was Octung Baby. For whatever reason, the sonic landscape of that record, all the different electric guitar sounds, and just the different approach to things and the lyrics and what they were doing with the tour of like trying to disorient folks and then kind of reorient them, like that really cemented it for me. So it was kind of that whole period of time from probably the early-ish 80s to that release of Octung and whatever that was, 90, 91, somewhere right in there, that really just nailed it for me and like sucked me into the whole U2 universe. That's for sure.
What has sustained your fandom over the years?
Um, I think the thing that for me has kept coming back to them is like the albums. Every time I listen to one of the albums, I know right where I was in my life at the time that record came out. And maybe that is something to say of the fact that they don't put out albums like all that often.
Right.
But I can go back to like remembering like listening to pop as a young youth pastor going for a run, and All That You Can't Leave Behind coming out when my kids were little, and working in this teen drop-in center with high-risk youth when How to Dismantle Atomic Bomb came
Mm.
out, and just all these, it became kind of the soundtrack kind of my life, and I think a little bit of my kids' lives. I don't know that any of my three daughters would say they're a U2 fan, but they all know U2. Like, and if I say like, oh, they put out a new record, they're like, oh yeah, I saw that. Like, they're aware of it, even though like I don't think their generation maybe spends as much time with U2 as folks who are my age. But yeah, I think that soundtrack element really kind of kept drawing me back in. And then I've also been sort of a big lyric person for a long time. So it's always, I think every time they put a record out, I really want to get my hands on it and start listening to it. And what have they been thinking about? What are they trying to say? What are they speaking into this moment? I think that part is, I'm always really curious too about like, oh, in this, however many years it's been, what have they been ruminating on and thinking about? And yeah, so I think that soundtrack aspect has been the biggest part, but then the lyrics keep bringing me back as well.
And now you've taken that and put it into a book. So tell me more about the book and how you were inspired to take on this project.
Yeah, I mean, I've been toying with for a long time, like wanting to write something to add to sort of the whole U2 academic reflective world. I was been aware of the U2 academic conference for years with Scott Calhoun and all those folks. but hadn't really had any plan to write a book about it. In fact, I was trying to get another book out this spring that I edited, and was thinking about another one that I'm working on. And then in the midst of all that, there were all these thoughts swirling in my head about just what was going on in the world. So even from the time the new administration came in, the second Trump administration, it felt like a lot of the spaces I was in, people were just asking the question of like, okay, what do we do in this moment of time? How do we live? And that was in the classroom. It was in our church context. It was in pastors groups I was part of. Just people were asking that question. So that was spinning around in my head. And then when Minneapolis happened, I think I had lots of questions around why are we so concerned about protesters in, quote, sacred spaces, but we're not as concerned about the human sacred spaces that are involved. So that was all, and so much more, but those things really stand out in this moment. It was all swirling around in my head. And then out of the blue, U2 releases this EP. So I was doing the same thing I'm doing right now, getting ready to get on a Zoom call. I had a class to teach, and I had like 5 minutes, and I was on social media, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think U2 released an album. Like, what just happened? So I quickly downloaded it and then went into class, and I had a busy day, and all day I was like, there's a new album. And even that night at the gym, as I'm listening to it, I started like taking notes on my phone, like things that were standing out, things that were like, oh, that's an interesting line. That's an interesting line. And within a couple of days, I had emailed my publisher and was like, hey, like the first question I asked was, how fast can we put a book out? Which was probably a little too ambitious. But like, are you guys interested in this? And he was like, yeah, go for it. So I kind of set up this idea of like, I'm going to write this book about this EP over Lent, which I almost made. I think it was the second or third week of Easter when I finished it, but tried to write a chapter a week, but that didn't quite work out. But it was almost like the prophet Isaiah talking about there's fire shut up in my bones, like this idea of I can't not do it. That's what it felt like for me. Is like, oh, I can't not spend time with this. And it felt like that's just what I wanted to do. So that's kind of how it came about. I wasn't really looking to, at that point, to like write anything else or think about anything else. Like I wasn't looking for a new project. But I felt like it kind of came and found me, to be
Right.
totally, yeah.
Well, and then were you then like startled by Easter Lily as you have mapped out this whole project, all of a sudden you're getting a
I
new EP?
absolutely was. I had seen like this, like, a post on social media that was like a, for lack of a better term, a conspiracy theory. They're like, oh, they're going to release like an album um, on Ash Wednesday, on Good Friday, and then like the album will come after, like, and it'll be this whole package, right? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. But I didn't put a lot of stock in it because they take so long to make records. I was like, no, this is great, and I think they are going to put a new record out, but like, I don't think. And then when it came out on Good
Friday.
Friday, I said to my
Yes.
wife, "Oh my gosh, they did it again! They like put another EP out," and she's like, "Well, your book will just have to get longer." And I was like, "No, like, this book is going to be done." But and you have a question later a little bit about this, but yeah, I was very startled by it, and then at that point, I almost had to like pretend that didn't exist so that I could finish the other project. I was like, I can't spend a lot of time with Easter Lily right now until
Right.
I get this other thing written. But yeah, it was a
Yeah.
total shock. Both of them were completely out of the blue.
Do you who do you see as your audience for the book that is done now?
Yeah. There's an endorser on the book, my friend Elizabeth Schultz, who's the regional presbyter for Alaska for the PCA USA churches. And I emailed her when I started the project and said, hey, she's a big U2 fan. I knew that. We've talked about it before. And I said, hey, would you be interested in reading this book and maybe endorsing it? And she was super excited. And I think she's a good example of like who I would imagine will read the book. Somebody who's very engaged in the world, very engaged in kind of how do we bring change in the world? How do we live in practically in the world as Christians, but also that are probably pretty well versed in the U2 catalog, or at least know more than the casual listener. And then also that have some theological background.
Yeah.
But I also hope that it's not just doesn't land in the hands of pastors necessarily, or professors or other U2 nerds, but anybody that in some sense, I hope it lands in the hands of anybody who's asking these questions of like, how do we live in the world? how do we speak on behalf of the marginalized? How do we empathize with others? How do we invite people in? All the themes that are happening on the EP. I hope that it lands with folks like that who are just like are used to the way that U2 speaks about those things. So this idea that this is a blatantly Christian record, I think from them won't scare them off, but also they're really interested in what's the practical implication of this in the world. That's who I hope will pick it up and read it.
And you're doing a bit of a mini book tour. I saw that you've got a Wild Goose festival engagement. What are you envisioning for spaces like that?
Yeah, that's really the first official. That's actually the release date, so to speak, for the book. So the Saturday of Wild Goose, September 5, is the official release date. In that particular seminar, what I'm doing is just in about an hour, we're going to listen just briefly to each track,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to give people an opportunity to consider kind of what I think U2 is asking us to consider in each chapter. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, as I think you obviously listened to the EP, I'm sure. That there's sort of questions that I feel like they're asking, and each chapter is sort of this choice that I think they're inviting us into. So I'll be inviting people in that seminar to really just think about that. What does it mean? For example, the album starts with, you have the right to remain silent or not. How do we use our voice? Do we choose to use it or not use it? And in what ways do we choose to use it? So just inviting folks to think through that briefly, so that hopefully they'll go away with some things to think about or some things to practice in the world. Or maybe just like me, the book helped me organize all these random thoughts in my head. Hopefully it'll do that for folks that come and sit down at the seminar, and it just becomes a way to help organize some things that are stirring already.
You use the term liturgy to talk about it. You call it, you choose Lenten liturgy, and it's the book says it's book one of the lyrical liturgies series. I'm curious what liturgy means to you and how you are using it here, and also if there are what's who what does that series look like?
Yeah. I'll answer the series question really quick. I didn't plan on doing any kind of series, but when that second EP dropped, I was like, well, now I have to kind of finish the project. I can't just do one. I'll do more than one. But I've also, like I said, been always been interested in lyrics and how they connect with faith and how artists are thinking about faith in very creative ways. So I can imagine writing other books in a similar way, either about songs or a collection of songs or coming back to an album. I'll definitely work on Easter Lily this coming year. There's no way around that. I already have notes around it and like starting to spend some more time with that and unpack it. Probably will, a new album will drop in the meantime, and then I'll be stuck in this predicament again of like what to listen to.
Oh
So that's
no.
the series. Yeah. Oh no, too much music. But that's sort of where the series comes from. Liturgy for me, and Beth Mader helped me with this a little bit. I had asked her to like look at the book, and she ended up not liking how I did liturgy, and that's okay. We come from a different place, but I tend to look at liturgy in the very loose definition that after Vatican II, the idea of it's a work of the people. So in the faith community that I've pastored the last decade or so, we talk about the service being a work of the people. Everybody brings something to it, but I know that Nicholas Walterstorff and others have said that's like a way to like freewheeling answer to how to interpret that word, but that it's more of a work that's done kind of as a public work, like something like public works, like we almost think about like a community park or something like that, or fresh water, those types of things. And I do think there's an element of U2's work that is very much geared towards how you will do something in the world. So it fits well with that. Like there is a liturgical aspect to what they do, of course, in their concerts. Lots of folks have written about how they craft their stagecraft is bringing you through a liturgy, and I think I agree, and I think it's a beautiful thing that they do. But I think they also are inviting people into that public works out in the world.
Hmm.
In specific, in the book, I borrow from Pius Kai, who's a Nigerian Catholic priest. He's been talking a lot about digital spaces and
Yes.
talking about that in those spaces they can become theological meaningful settings. Are defined by, and I'm looking at the quote because I wouldn't be able to remember otherwise, but that the digital spaces create an atmosphere, they have symbolism, they have interactivity and community interpretation. And I talk about with the album or with this EP, the music and the sonic landscape that U2's always been good at creating creates an atmosphere. There's definitely a feeling that they're good at like creating a world that you step into. So it's maybe not necessarily always a liturgical space, but sometimes it very much is. And they are definitely operating with symbolism, very much using the Christian symbolic universe. But I think because of the digital world, there is so much interaction and community interpretation that happens right away, that even looking back, and I'm going to be like that old guy, but back when I was a kid, you had to wait for like, Rolling Stone or whoever to write a review. Now it's like people are like posting their video that day of like my first reaction to the record. So I think looking at what Kai is saying, um, it really is a liturgical space in that sense of like it creates an atmosphere, it uses all these symbols, and then the community is interpreting this. And even though you're listening to it kind of individually, which is different than how we think about liturgy normally, we're gathered sort of in this, I don't know what the right word would be. This space, as soon as we put our headphones on or our speakers or whatever, we're in that space
Yes.
together in that EP, and everybody's trying to interpret that in one way or another. So that's kind of how I think about it. But I also think they're inviting us into, because they released it at the beginning of Lent with a very like liturgical name, in my opinion, and like even with the colors, they're very much nodding at this is meant to be like a liturgy or a spiritual practice
Yeah.
for this time, both as Lent but also the moment that we're in. So I think
Right.
that's how I was thinking about liturgy in the book. So
Yeah.
in some senses a really broad definition, but in other ways not as much.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you see you two intersecting with your life in general? Like the elephant in the room here is I'm talking to you and you're in a van. So I we should mention that.
Yeah, my wife and I are at the beginning of an adventure where we drove our van from Anchorage, Alaska, where I've lived the last 3 decades, down to what we call in Alaska the lower 48, so the 48 contiguous U.S. states, and we're spending a year doing that. So in some ways, it's a very different thing for us. We've been in intentional community in a trailer park for almost 20 years. I was pastoring and doing other ministry in Anchorage, and now my main gig is being a professor. Over the years, though, U2 stuff has just showed up in like lots of what I've done. So, from quoting it in sermons, you know, to, you know, using it as a soundtrack. I sometimes, when if I'm writing a sermon, which I don't do as much now because there's a lot of more discussion based in our community, but using it as like a soundtrack, if there's songs that are like about the topic, or I often will create a playlist, not just of U2, but of other bands, but U2's definitely been part of that. So in the pastoral world, that's where it's played out. In the academic space, I mean, I've the same thing. Often I'm playing music as students are coming into the Zoom room. More Quite often U2 shows up in there. I'm reading Stevens Harmon's book right now that I know
Yes.
you've had him on as well. That's really got me thinking about if there's a way for us to teach theology, using them as a window into how we maybe think about theology and public theology. So I'm in the middle of the book. I actually need to write him a note today because I'm loving what he's doing. So that's one thing. And there's a YouTube book out on U2 and trauma. I have the
Mm.
title here somewhere. It's
Yeah.
yeah, U2 songs of trauma and hope between midnight
Yes.
and the dawning. And I've read some of that, and I teach a class on spirit and trauma, and I'm still trying to figure out like how to work some of that in, because I think they do a great job of especially collective trauma in
Hmm.
the during their adolescence and young adult lives with all the troubles in Ireland. What that looks like and how they speak about that and how they're speaking about that 40 years later. They're still writing about how these are important moments that they come back to. So I'm still trying to figure out how to incorporate that. And then I've also assigned Christian Sharon's chapter from his book, um, uh, for years to students to, as we talk about theology of glory and theology of the cross. I think his chapter in One Step Closer was really good. So it's hard to get through classes with me without reading that chapter at some point.
Yes.
And I was thrilled that Christian was able to endorse the book. So I was really excited at that. So that's some ways that it's intersected over the years out in more my professional life, so to speak, than in my personal life.
All right. Well, I will definitely share links and help people see how to get your book and come see you on the road if I get this out in time. Uh, Thank you so much, Joel, for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope folks will pick up the book and give it a listen. I'd love to hear from folks if they what they think. If they got different interpretations, I'd love to hear that too because I'm always there's so many layers to what U2's doing that there's no way any of us are catching all of them, I don't think. And I think that's also what they invite us into, I think, is that these lyrics are there for interpretation and for reflection. So, yeah, thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. Take care.